Hi, it's Nicole. It's been a little while. I hope you are all doing well. Today, I'm setting reading goals for 2024. I'll talk you through my review and planning process. If you'd like to set some goals for the new year as well, I hope this video gives you some ideas and motivation. If you are interested in any of my goals, you are most welcome to come along and join in the fun. I'll share my channel goal at the end of the video too. Firstly, a quick review. I made two similar videos this time last year. One is the overarching goals, that's what I'm doing today. The other is a more detailed plan according to those goals and a list of TBRs to be read. How did I do in 2023? English classics was my first goal, and half of the titles I planned were Victorian novels. However, over the course of this year, I noticed that I gravitated heavily towards modern classics from the early 20th century instead. I read 5 novels from the early 20th century and only 2 from the 19th century, and 3 titles from the 18th century for Jane Austen July. I will continue to read English classics, and I think I'll carry on in this direction. English classics from the early 20th century and English classics that come before the Victorian era. I want to introduce you to less familiar English classic titles. Shakespeare was my second goal. I separated Shakespeare from general English classics last year as a goal of its own. It was the right decision. I read 8 plays, various sonnets, and about 5 non-fictional books about his life and work. I also co-hosted Shakestamber for the first time. It's been a challenging and rewarding year in terms of getting to know Shakespeare. I'll continue reading and watching Shakespeare's plays in the new year. I read so many tragedies recently that I am craving for some comedies and fun. In Jonathan Bates' Mad About Shakespeare, there is a little quote from John Yeats. He said, "I felt rather lonely this morning, so I went and unboxed a Shakespeare. There's my comfort." That's a place I want to get to myself instead of Harry Potter. I want Shakespeare's plays to become my comfort read. I wonder how long it will take me to get there, but that's the destination. I read some fabulous non-fictional works about Shakespeare this year. I have a long list of exciting titles to read next year. We'll share it in the planning video. A closely related but brand new goal is to read Shakespeare's contemporaries. This is inspired mostly by The Genius of Shakespeare by Jonathan Bate, when he said something like Shakespeare became Shakespeare because of the death of Marlowe, and also in 1599 by James Shapiro, where he put Shakespeare and Globe into context. They were friends, they were rivals. Shakespeare's works do not stand in a vacuum outside of time and space. I want to know what kind of plays Londoners were watching when Shakespeare came onto the scene. My third goal was to read the Bible as literature and to see how it influenced culture and literature. I received a lot of suggestions and recommendations from you. Thanks very much. I have been reading the Bible, but I didn't make any videos about any Bible books this year. I'm going to leave it for 2024 until I find some more specific directions. My goal number 4 last year was to get into Greek and Roman myth. I'm tempted to say I failed this one because I didn't read nearly as much as I set out to do, but to put it positively, I made a start. I planned to read epic poems, prose and plays by various authors, but in the end I only finished the Iliad and half of Metamorphoses. Compared to the beginning of the year, I'm happy to say it's still challenging, but I'm not intimidated by the genre anymore. A brief review on the Iliad and Metamorphoses, why I managed to finish one and not the other. The Iliad is long and has many characters, but it's one long story and the number of the main characters is limited. The audiobook helped a lot too. I enjoyed it way more than I expected, and I made 5 videos on various characters from the Iliad. It was fun. Metamorphoses reads like a collection of interconnected short stories, and there are an infinite number of characters. A rough example would be something like the author tells the story of character A telling B and a group of people a story about characters C and D. By the end of the chapter, I forgot about A and B because the story is about C and D. So I had to go back and find out who A and B are. And B's father-in-law appears a few chapters later and starts to talk about E, telling a story about F and G, and on it goes. I just couldn't keep up. This translation helps a lot when I'm in the middle of a story. I enjoy it very much. As soon as I put it down, I lose the connection between the chapters and it's hopeless. I'm kind of carrying on with this goal next year, but I'm approaching it a bit differently. I have 2 new goals for 2024. I picked up plays quite naturally over this year without planning to do so. As I watched Shakespeare's plays in the theatre, I watched some other stuff along the way, and I was never disappointed. Theatre is really magical. In addition to that, this goal is also inspired by The Genius of Jane Austen by Paula Byrne. I read it in July, and as part of Jane Austen July, I read Lover's Vows and enjoyed it more than I expected. I want to read more plays that influenced Jane Austen's novels. Little by little, I twigged that the play used to be a major form of literature in the past. It was the main form of culture and entertainment for centuries across Europe, and it was popular before the novel was a thing. It's a type of classic literature that has become less mainstream now, maybe. I went to half a dozen of bookshops in Edinburgh in November, in both secondhand bookshops and new bookshops. Drama usually occupies a tiny amount of shelf space, especially if you compare it to fiction or novels. I also find that category interesting. Drama is fictional too, but the distinction might be historical. I wonder if I've gravitated towards drama because the number of plays out there is probably smaller than novels. I look at the drama section and maybe subconsciously I think this is manageable. One day I'll be able to read them all. I wouldn't be able to think that about novels just by looking around. I've gone off topic. I was saying drama is an important part of classic literature and I want to pay more attention to it. There are overlaps between drama and my other goals like English classics and Shakespeare and his contemporaries, especially the second one. They'd mostly be drama. My goals and categories are not very scientific. They only show my intention. I also want to see if this might be the way into classics around the world as well. For example, in addition to the ancient Greek plays, I quite like to try Faust by Goethe this coming year and reread some of Chekhov's plays. I'd also like to introduce some Chinese plays to you, and who knows what else I'll discover. I'm really excited about this goal. Any recommendations? Please leave me a comment. I mentioned how drama usually takes up a small section of any bookshops. Another thing I noticed is that drama and poetry often take up that small space together. I love huge bookshops, but I get stressed and tired in huge bookshops too. But my recent bookshop trips were simple and focused because of drama and poetry. I've been very happy about that. I find poetry incomprehensible as well as irresistible. I met a spoken word artist this year and that made a big impression on me and gave me a new understanding of poetry. As a result, I wrote a poem in the form of a sonnet about Richard III right after I finished reading Shakespeare's play. It was a fun experience and I loved it. I wrote stories before. This was the first time I wrote a poem. It's like a snapshot, one frame out of a film. I used to do photography, so I immediately felt the similarity between capturing a moment in the poem and in the photo. All that is just to say my goal is to know more about poetry and read more poems this coming year. I've been collecting books of poetry, and on the subject of poetry, I will show you what I have in the planning and TBR video. So my 4 reading goals for 2024 are English classics, Shakespeare and his contemporaries, drama and poetry. Let me finish this annual video with the goal of my channel for 2024. I said the same thing last year because it hasn't changed. Being enthusiastic about reading classics together like schoolmates. The enthusiastic part is easy. I want you to feel like getting up and taking books off the shelves and start reading after you watch my videos. And I'd like to be schoolmates with you as I continue to be an amateur in literature. Let me quote C.S. Lewis. It often happens that 2 schoolboys can solve difficulties in their work for one another better than the master can. The fellow pupil can help more than the master because he knows less. The difficulty we want him to explain is one he has recently met. The expert met it so long ago that he has forgotten. This is my 2nd year on BookTube, my 2nd year reading Shakespeare. I haven't got an English degree, I'm brand new to drama and poetry. My hope is to be your fellow schoolmate who knows less than the master and as a result be able to understand your frustrations and explain things better. For example, I read Ulysses in 2021 for the first time and it was a struggle. As a beginner who has no English degree and no tutor, I felt my way around the subject, did a lot of homework, which meant I could share my experience and tips with my fellow Ulysses first-timers. Another example, as I started to read Shakespeare's plays, in a short space of time I collected 6 or 7 different editions. I was able to compare them and recommend which ones are most helpful for beginners. And those 2 videos are my 2 most viewed videos. I think that says something. I know most of you read for knowledge and pleasure as I do, but I also know that many of you take reading seriously. There's nothing negative about the word amateur as C.S. Lewis uses it. Austin Kleon says in his book, Show Your Work, the amateur are the enthusiasts who pursues her work in the spirit of love, regardless of the potential for fame, money, or career. And above all, I want to share my reading experience and thought process with you. We can compare notes. That is the goal of my channel. Being enthusiastic about reading classics together like schoolmates. If this sounds good to you, I do my best to make videos with you in mind. Paraphrasing C.S. Lewis again, I will speak as one amateur to another. I'll talk about difficulties I have met or lights I have gained when reading classics, with the hope that this might interest and sometimes even help you. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.